Hello, welcome back. So this is the week 0 third video, functions and arrays. Yeah. So if I go inside, okay. So few things we are going to cover today: functions and function prototypes, scope and lifetime of variables, and basic arrays. Yeah. Very important thing. Of course, when we get into more of an advanced phase, we'll talk about recursive functions, etc. But this is just a refresher of our C++. Yeah. So functions. Yeah. Now we know that every C program or C++ program, or in fact even Java program, okay, they will have one special function called main. Yeah. So function is essentially a collection of your program statement grouped under a name, so that by referring the name, I'm actually executing all the statements inside that block. Yeah. So it's a named block, but then it is slightly different or slightly more than just a named block. Let's talk about first main. Yeah. So main is a special function that's an entry point. Yeah. So all your programs always start with main. Yeah. It's not necessary that you should not have other functions. You can always have other function, but the execution always starts with main. Yeah, that's why it is a special function. Yeah. So like that main, we can actually have our own functions, what we call it as user defined function. So in this case, we have a function called square, which is meant for essentially squaring a number, right? So we can always use functions. We can always define our own functions and use it. Yeah. So whenever we are using a function, remember that function should have a name, and user defined function should not have the name main. Yeah, that's important thing. Yeah. So have a name. Most of the time in C++ we use lowercase, so that's why and C++ are in fact C++, Java, these are all case sensitive languages, right? So you should ensure that you are using a lowercase. Yeah. Now function will have a name. Function will always have a return type. So what it means is, whenever a function is executed, after execution of the function, what are we actually doing? So are we returning anything back? For example, in this case, square. Yeah. So this is a function I have written. What I am expecting is, if I give a number to this function, it should square it and return me the square. Yeah. So that's why a return type is important. Yeah. But sometimes some functions may not return anything. For example, I want to write my print as a function, which will just print something on the output. Yeah. But we don't want to return anything. In that case, you will say void. Yeah. So void is a special word, special keyword. So by specifying void, we are explicitly telling compiler that my function doesn't return anything. Yeah, but most of the time our function will return. And C++, Java, remember, the function can return only one thing. Yeah, like Python, etc. they return multiple things, but in C++, Java, the function can only return one thing. Yeah, so a function will have a name, function will have a return type. Yeah, then function can optionally have parameters. Yeah, they can take input. Normally, you can imagine function like a block, kind of like a black box. Yeah, you give some input, it does some processing, it gives some output. Yeah, so if you wanted to give input to your function, then you give it through parameters. So if you are giving one input, you can use one parameter. If you want to pass multiple input, for example, I want to pass two numbers, and the function is expected to return addition of that two input numbers, then you pass two parameters. Okay? So every parameter, or how many parameters you are using, so those many parameters need to be declared. So, and whenever I am declaring a parameter, I should also declare what is the data type of that parameter. Yeah. So in case of int, in case of main, main doesn't take parameter. Of course, the main also takes a parameter. There is a different underscore main function. We are not talking about it, but in our regular C++ case, main doesn't take any parameter, you can see. So that's why it is not declaring anything. Yeah, but it is saying that it is returning integer type, which is after execution of main, we are returning 0, saying that my main function is all successful. No worries about it. Yeah. Whereas in this case, square function takes one number and returns the square of it. Now most of the time you will normally declare these functions and also implement this function. Implementation means what is this function is expected to do, right? So that is called implementation of function. So you actually do the function definition, which is declaring and implementing everything in one single place. Most of the time this whole thing will be prior to main. Remember, main is the entry point. When you're using main as an entry point and you're using square function somewhere inside the main, compiler should know basic thing about it. One is, what is this function, what parameters it takes, and what it returns, right? So if you are implementing this function after the main for any reason, then you have to declare it first as a prototype. So this is called function prototype. Yeah. So what we're saying is, I'm going to have one function called square, which will return int, and it will take one parameter which is of type int. Yeah. And then I may be implementing it separately. Yeah. But most of the time we will actually do this prior to main, so that I don't have to do this again. I mean, I will implement here itself directly. Yeah. So that is the normal thing. But then once you have the function implemented, you can actually call that function any number of times, yeah, in that particular program. So in this case, we're reading a number, then we're calling square function, passing this number, and then taking that results, because this function returns an integer, right? So you can actually catch that returned output into a variable. Yeah, and then you can use this. Yeah. So this is how your function work. You can always try, I mean, try calling this square function without parameter and see what happens. And second thing is, we know that function returns integer. Try to use a floating point number or a double variable here and see what happens, what would be the output. So try and see those things. But functions or user defined functions are possible in C, C++, Java. In fact, any type of programming language if you take, they have this concept of functions. So why do we need function? It helps us to actually reuse the code. For example, I can write square function and I can call it any number of times. Now square can be called on one number, then square can be called on another number, then third square can be called again on third number. Yeah. So this is how things can work out. Similarly, for example, I can pack this square into a library and distribute it, and my friend can just include that header file and then start using my function. So this is how code reusability is actually achieved through functions. Yeah. So that's about function. Next is scope and lifetime of variable. Very, very important thing. All you need to remember is C++, in fact C++, Java, they allow you to have variables globally or locally or within a scope. Yeah. Like for example, in this program, if you take, right, I have one variable called global var. Yeah. This is declared outside of any function, like outside of this main function, right? Now this variable is actually accessible or available. You can use this variable inside main function. Yeah. But then there is another variable called local variable, which is declared inside the main function. Yeah. Now what is the difference between this variable and this variable? Yeah. In terms of scope, remember, global variable is alive, or its life is beyond this function main. For example, just for the sake of discussion, assume I have one more function here after the main. Yeah. Like for example, like this square function. After the main, I have this square function. Assume that I have one function here. Yeah. Now in that function, I can still use global variable because its life is still beyond main function. Whereas local variable is actually declared inside a function main because it is declared here. Sorry for this context menu. So it is declared here inside main, right? So its scope is only within the main function. So the moment control comes out of main, this variable is not available. It is gone. So inside your another function here, for example, square function, for example, if you attempt to use local variable, compiler says, what is local variable? I don't understand what is local variable. Yeah. So that is the life. This is called local variable because it is local to this function. this is called global variable because it is global to multiple functions. Yeah, now you can always have variables declare inside a block. Like for example, it could be a simple block like this, or it could be a for loop, it should be while loop for example, or if block, etc. Right? Then if it is within a block, yeah, then it's limited to that block only. So block variable in this case, for example, is not even accessible inside the same function outside the block. You can imagine local variable is inside this block, so outside this block it is not accessible. Same way, this block variable is within this block only. Once your control is outside, you can't see this block. For example, if I try to print this, you will get an error. Why? Because this block variable is actually declared inside this block. Yeah, so you need to be very much aware of these. This is very important in terms of two things, and you may ask, why is this headache? Like, why can't I just declare everything as a global variable, right? Even this variable I will declare global variable, this variable I will declare global variable. Yeah, then you will end up with variable conflicts, right? Different functions cannot have same name. Yeah, there will be conflict. That's one thing. And second thing is, since if you have global variable, their lifetime is large, but then functions can override it, and then there will be a lot of confusion. So that's why always try to have a variable declared only up to the block that you really want to use it. Yeah, don't always declare global variable. And in fact, most of the time we never declare global variable. We at least stick to function level variables, local variables. Yeah, so that's about variables and scope. Yeah, now arrays. Yeah, very important thing. Even with respect to DSA, arrays is basically a collection of multiple data of same type. Yeah, some programming languages allow, for example, Python allows an array to have integer numbers, floating point numbers, and name, everything inside the same array. Yeah, they call it as list. Yeah, whereas here C, C++, Java, if you take, array is basically allow you to group same type of data. For example, in this case, I have 5 numbers. Yeah, I can group them. Yeah, until and unless they are only numbers, I can group them. But the moment they become, for example, floating point number, I cannot group in the same group. I cannot put it in the same group. Yeah, so this is how the arrays are actually declared. Of course, here I am saying that I am going to have an array of size 5, and this array is going to hold integer type of numbers, integer type of 5 numbers. Yeah, now you can declare like this and as well as initialize like this if you want. Yeah, or you can always initialize it later. But then very important thing is, if you are using array, you have to have the size and you have to have the data type declared. Yeah, so here we are declaring an array of size 5, which is of integer type, and initializing it with 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Yeah, if you don't initialize, what happens? Try for example in this case. Yeah, remove this whole piece and see what really happens. What is this array going to contain? Don't read it. Yeah, just try to print it and see what is going to happen. Yeah, but then after seeing that, you will understand why it is important that if you are using an array, it should be populated before you are going to use it. Yeah, so that's very important. In this case, we are declaring an array of 5 elements, and then we are just trying to add all these numbers. So we are iterating through array. Very important thing is, and you must be already aware of it, an array will always be accessed through an index. Index starts from 0. So 10th element is available in this array at 0th place. Even though it is a first number in this group, yeah, it is available at 0th place. So that's why index is 0. That's why your loop, if you are trying to access this array elements one by one, your index starting with 0, you're going up to, because there are 5 numbers, you're going up to 4. Yeah, that's why this is a size I less than 5. So if you try to use, for example, if I becomes 5 and try to access it, yeah, we normally call it as array out of bound. because you're trying to access the sixth element and see what really happens. Yeah. So we are accessing one by one element starting from 0 till 5, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, that is 5 numbers. That's why array index is incremented. So array element is always accessed through name of the array and index, array of I. When I is 0, array of 0 is 10. Yeah. When I becomes 1, array of 1 is 20. So what we are doing here, we just keep on adding every number into the sum. So finally we'll get sum starting with 0, 0 plus 10, that becomes 10, 10 plus 20, then that becomes plus 30, then that becomes plus 40, plus 50, and finally we're printing it. So this is how your arrays are actually used. Yeah. So very important thing. And of course, I did not cover one major thing which will potentially try to start discussing very soon, is about when you're using functions. We have concept called function parameters that are being passed either by value or by reference. Yeah, or by using addresses basically. Yeah. So that is very important thing. We will discuss it separately. But remember, functions can have a clear parameter list and the return type. Yeah, you should be able to explain these things. Pass by value, pass by reference, the difference between that we will discuss it, but that is very important thing with respect to your interviews. Yeah. Avoid using global variables because they can lead to unexpected outcome, because if your global variables can be modified inside any other function and it will impact all other functions. Yeah. Know the array bounds. Most of the people make mistake here initially. For example, try changing I less than or equal to. By making I less than or equal to, you try to access the sixth number, because I becomes 5, 0 to 5, when 5 is sixth number. Yeah. When you try to use it, what happens? Try to see that. Yeah. So you should be very, very disciplined around the array bounds. Yeah. So that is very important thing. So these are the some key interview related things that you can actually read through. Yeah. So in the next video we will look at the next part of it. Bye.